Hi, my name is Catherine Lonegrub, and I'm going to be explaining to y'all the Cuban Missile Crisis today for my project, my final project for my class Political Science 2057 in the summer of 2017. Alright, so the Cuban Missile Crisis began in October of 1962. A little history into that time. 1962 in October, it was during the Cold War, and tensions were high between all the states. And so obviously the Cuban Missile Crisis came about because of some of those high tensions and state mistrust within each other. So the Cuban Missile Crisis mainly involved the United States and Soviet Union and Cuba. So the United States at the time was run by John Kennedy. The Soviet Union was by Nikita Khrushchev. Pronouncing his name wrong, I'm sorry, I'm so bad with names. But it was Nikita Khrushchev. And then Cuba at the time didn't have like a super official leader, but it was Fidel Castro. He was the leader at the time. Alright, so the Cuban Missile Crisis all began because of the super high tensions between the Soviet Union and between the United States. And so at this time, John Kennedy believed that Cuba had become allies or got along with the Soviet Union, and the United States did not get along with the Soviet Union. So in October, I think it was the 14th of October, a United States fighter jet flew over Cuba and noticed that there was a giant missile being built. Obviously, the United States didn't know about anything being built in Cuba at the time, and it came as a huge shock to the fighter jet and to John Kennedy. So John Kennedy flew into action. He did not want any tensions or nuclear war. He just wanted to get on top of this and figure out what was going on and deal with the problem. So John Kennedy, he decided to get all of his troops together, and basically he brought all of his troops and he brought them out and built a blockade around the state of Cuba. And he said, okay, we're not gonna move until this missile is gone. And you know, the Soviet Union didn't want to give it up. They had obviously reasons to have the missile. It was a huge help to their country. The Soviet Union was trying to gain all its power, and obviously the island of Cuba, or I don't know why I'm saying island, the state of Cuba, was relying on the Soviet Union, and this was all, transpiring as under their kind of alliance, but the United States wasn't having it. So President Kennedy brought all of his troops and built a blockade around Cuba, and they refused to leave until the missiles were gone. So they stayed there for a while, and then there was finally a compromise reached through the Soviet Union, Cuba, and the United States. So basically the compromise was that the United States would pull back and they wouldn't invade Cuba. And the condition was that they would do this as long as the missile was gone from in Cuba and there weren't any more that were going to be built. So the United States agreed, but there was one catch. The compromise also did say that the United States had to withdraw their missiles in Turkey. And Turkey wasn't hugely known, so the United States didn't publicly announce that. They announced the compromise between the Soviet Union and Cuba, and they announced that they were going to take their troops out and the missile was going to be gone. And they did remove their missiles from Turkey, but it was kind of swept under the rug. It wasn't widely known. But anyways, the compromise existed, and eventually the missile was removed, and the United States went back to doing whatever the United States was doing in the Cold War, and tensions were greatly improved. But so, all of a sudden, this can be explained by a number of theories that correspond with the international system. So, first, I'll start with the realist. Basically, the realist is saying that all states are going to fend for themselves. Every state is looking for its own national interest, and it's going to do whatever it is that is in its own international interest. So, for the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was in the United States' interest to go and try to alleviate that tension. And it was in their interest not to invade directly because they didn't want to be attacked, and that would have brought huge negative repercussions on the state for them. But for the Soviet Union, having that missile would have increased their power and it would have increased their national status. Like, having the missile was good for them, for their national standpoint, not as much for the whole international system as itself. But the realist system doesn't say that all the states are going to get along. It says that all the states are going to do what they individually need to do to be successful. Then there is the liberal point of view. So, the liberalist theory of international relations says that all people are generally good, and that kind of goes the same for the states. So, the liberalist theory of international relations would explain this event in that the United States was just looking out for its people, and it was just doing what it needed to do in order to benefit the people and benefit the entire good. And that would explain, why President Kennedy was so thoughtful, and he made sure that he wasn't going to go and invade and harm the lives of the people who lived in Cuba and the people of the Soviet Union, and most of all, the citizens of the United States. According to the liberal point of view, this would also explain the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, it was creating the missiles, and that would increase their power. But it was generally good. They were trying to increase. It was, in my opinion, it was more of a realist move on the Soviet Union because they were increasing their military strength. But this military strength ties into the strength of their country and to basically the freedoms that their people have and how much room they have to negotiate with other countries and rely on each other. And the liberalist system relies on self-reliance. So this basically means that by creating a compromise, these states were trying to work together and create a system where they didn't have to be in strife and where they could get along and they could work things out without making it so complicated. Okay. Then there is the social constructivist theory of international relations, and that says that everything is relative. Everything is going to be developed differently, and it's going to be interpreted differently depending on what the culture is at the time and how the people at the time are reacting to everything. So, the social constructivist theory of international relations might explain this event in that the tensions of the Cold War were super high and everybody was very worried, and so therefore they, reacted immediately, and they just did whatever they had to do to protect their country. And this was all based on the relative theory that the United States could be in jeopardy. And the Soviet Union, was acting on a similar basis. They were also worried, and the Cold War was providing them some pretty unusual circumstances. All right. Moving on, the radicalist theory. So, the radicalist theory of international relations is based on extremes. The radicalist theory says that war is inevitable and states are only looking out for themselves, but the difference is here that they only do what they have to do. They believe that sometimes violence and fighting is the only answer, and they're going to do whatever they have to do to get that. And this would explain why the Soviet Union was so willing to build missiles. Anyway, I hope this explains the Cuban Missile Crisis for you. I really enjoyed researching this topic. It was very interesting, and I had a great time in this course. So I hope you have a great rest of your day or whatever time it is that you're watching this, and I will see you soon. Thank you.